Testing.
Hey everybody, welcome to our discussion tonight. We're so honored that you joined us for What's at Stake, and we're going to have a conversation about why the 2020 presidential election is so important. My beautiful wife, Pastor Trina, is with me. You gonna say hi?
Hello, everyone.
And we have some amazing guest panelists with us tonight. People who have a wealth of knowledge about the election and it can offer a perspective that we may not be able to necessarily share. We may have it, but we may not be able to articulate it as well as they can. So we have with us Miss Anitra Brown, who serves with us at ANWA DC, who we love so much. She's also the Assistant Director of Admissions at Howard University Law School. We have Pastor Mike McBride, who is the exemplary man of God, who is a very militant man. I keep calling him Mr. Militant, but he's the co-founder of Black Church PAC, which is an organization which is helping to organize the church and make them more aware of what's happening with our voting rights and everything else that has to do with voting. We have my good friend, Ted Winn, who is a very well-known gospel artist, but he's also an activist, and he's quite militant himself. Quite militant, yeah. Very outspoken, and he'll definitely be able to share a wealth of knowledge as well. And we have our amazing friends who we look up to as our big brother and sister, Pastors Warryn Campbell and Pastor Erica Campbell, who, of course, Warryn Campbell is a multi-award-winning not just gospel, just award-winning producer, but he also serves as the lead pastor at the California Worship Center in Los Angeles, California. And then Erica Campbell, half of the group Mary, and a very well-known solo artist herself, multi-awards, so many things that we just can't even name, but she also serves as the co-pastor at California Worship Center. And we are just so honored to have all of you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Man, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
All power to the people.
Power to So we're going to start with the Campbells. About a month ago, they reached out to quite a few gospel artists and encouraged us all to share our platforms with people and use our platforms to make people more aware of why this year's election is so important. So when we decided to have this discussion tonight, there was no way we could have it without talking to you both. Can you share with us why this election has become so important to you that you're encouraging others to be a part of it and to share their platforms and let them?
Well, hello. Because we are the light of the world, our light should not only shine in church, right? And a lot of the things that we pray for God to fix, and a lot of things that we cry and weep over and share our condolences is literally things that we could vote to change in our cities, in our systems, as it relates to police reform and as it relates to housing and so many other things that we want in our cities, our schools, and our voices are not heard. And I love that we all sing together, but after we put the microphone down, we need to be voting and challenging the people that follow us to not just buy our music, but to be educated and to know their power. You know what I mean? If God told us to take dominion, that didn't just mean over the church. And so I felt like since there's so many people paying attention, they weren't just paying attention because of the song. We have a responsibility to say more. And so I'm challenging different ones to open up their mouth just to speak truth to power and fight in a different way. Yes, we know we have to fast and pray, but at the same time, we need to be educated and aware of what's going on in our systems and in our cities. And that power comes through voting, and sometimes even through political office. Listen, we got some gospel artists that will open up their mouths and talk. And so if we could, in a small way, challenge people or just spark them to look at things differently and look at their ability to change things, then I feel like I'm doing my part. So,
And also, just to let all of the artists who have platforms know that it is our right to challenge and hold these politicians accountable. It's not just because they're in office, they're not all powerful. We have power, the power of the people. And so, vote. I know like my wife said, we're going to pray, but my bishop said, my generation prayed. We did a lot of marching, a lot of praying. He said, y'all need to pray less. and vote more.
Yeah. So speaking of gospel artists who definitely speak truth to power, our brother Ted Winn has been speaking truth. I would say over the last couple of years, even more than ever. And I think you become more known for that than you have been for music. And I think you've welcomed that. What started this journey that you've been on over the last few years to making sure you use your voice to make people aware of oppression and how we need to fight it?
I think really just being introspective and thinking of myself first as, on the spiritual side as a believer. And if I'm a believer who loves God and loves people, then I feel like it's just natural to be concerned about the well-being of people. I think that's what God would want us to do, and that's how we should show up in the earth. And so when we're thinking about people, irrespective of race or religion or gender, then we should think about the ways that people are affected. And most people in this country are affected through policy and through laws and through procedures that happen. And so as I began to think about it and hear what was happening and see the election of the current president and how we were not just having these conversations about big government, little government, but seeing things actually rolled back, seeing the Voting Rights Act gutted, right? Seeing the people potentially losing healthcare. I just couldn't just stand by and be silent about that. And I've always been politically engaged, but again, to your point, I felt like it was an opportunity to use my platform. And I struggled with it because I even created like a separate account, to do politics and what have you, but it just wasn't working. And so I just was like, look, people are listening to some degree. So I'm gonna, speak to the people who are listening. And what I have found out is that a lot of people who, follow me or listen were, because of the music, were not as engaged and some were not as informed. And so it became an opportunity to have this conversation with other people of faith about why we should be engaged. What is our civic responsibility? And then looking historically to the people like Dr. King, to Abernathy, list goes on and on, people who were people of faith, people who were believers, people who were Christian, people who loved God, who proclaimed the gospel of Jesus Christ, but also were very clear about our responsibility to engage civically, because we have a responsibility to make the world a better place in every way we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Anitra, who serves as the assistant director at Howard University Law School, she has been very helpful for us in making us aware of ways we can be engaged in things that we need to be made aware of. We can be honest. We are semi-aware, probably just as much as the average person in their home. And I think for us and many people, because we're not fully aware, we're quiet. Mm-hmm. And what you need to do is connect with people who are aware so they can share information so you can speak at least with a little bit of knowledge. So Anitra's been there for us, but you're also doing that at Howard University Law School. Can you share from your perspective why this election is so important?
Absolutely. What I found, first of all, I got to Howard Law working there because I'm a civil rights attorney by trade. And I was becoming very dissatisfied with even my ability to impact those around me. I can only handle so many cases at once, right? And so God opened it up for me to join the staff at Howard Law to begin welcoming the newer generation of social engineers. But it was a setup, because he really wanted me to go back to school. So I'm currently at the Howard School of Divinity focusing on and getting another degree in the actual original biblical languages because I needed to know a little bit more about this direction that God wanted us to take, especially here in America. And what I found was that if you go into the book of Genesis and you look at how God has set up this system that we're supposed to be mirror images of, the way he creates is a Hebrew word called bara. But when we get to Genesis 6 and we see the word covenant for the first time, that word is barat. It's the same root word, which means to cut. This is where we get this idea of circumcision as a symbol of cutting. And so when we look into the definition of the big granddaddy of Hebrew lexicons, we find out that you can cut a covenant between God and man. We can cut covenant between spouses. We know that. But we can also cut covenant among people. And the word right there in the lexicon is constitution. America did not create the concept of a constitution. We were created to cut and form and define a relationship among one another within nations. And so if we are going to accept where we are as believers, where we are as images of God, we have to accept that we were always created to manage our relationship, our covenant, our constitution amongst each other.
That's powerful. That's really powerful.
She always shuts it.
I had no idea. I'm being honest. Yeah. I had no idea that it goes that deep into the Bible, whereas forming constitutions is like cutting a covenant. That's just like a whole revelation all itself.
Absolutely. So, and that's why we have her around us.
Yeah.
But it's also why we wanted to speak with Pastor McBride today, because a lot of us have thought that the church is supposed to stay out of politics. But what you have done is you've made it your business to make sure the church is organized and can get directly right involved with politics. Can you share your feeling about that and why you decided to help found this organization called Black Church PAC?
Yeah, I just am glad to be here with you, JJ and Pastor Trina, and certainly all the comrades. I just gotta say, Dr. Anitra Brown, girl, I'm a let me say something. The first time I'm gonna quote you. The second time I'm gonna say it's been said, and the third time, like as I always say, because that was and I've been to seminary. They didn't teach me that at Duke. I just want you to know that. So what you get over there at Howard is good stuff. I certainly do believe, right, that the work that we are called to do, whether it's stewardship, dominion, constitution, or helping to manage creation, is an outgrowth and a key part of our salvation. And we as Black people in particular have never had the real kind of dissonance until very recently, when we started kind of hanging out with more white like Christians and wanting to be with them. Then all of a sudden we got dissonance about being politically active. We were politically active when we was in slavery. We were politically active during the Civil War. The Black church was very politically active during the Civil Rights Movement. We were politically active trying to get rid of new Jim Crow, or the Jim Crow. And so I do think we should reclaim, as followers of Jesus, who are Black people in this country, dealing with the unique realities of the kind of human hierarchy that is white supremacy and anti-Black racism. We should reclaim our tradition as Black people in this country who know Jesus. And we knew a version of Jesus that many other people in this country did not know. We knew Jesus first as a liberator. We knew Jesus first as a savior of not just our soul, but also our body. And that is the great contribution, I think, one of many, to this country and to the world, that you follow Jesus, not just to get to heaven, but you follow Jesus so the kingdom can be on earth as it is in heaven, right? And so for me, when I got beat up by some cops in 1999, my young people at the time, I grew up in the apostolic church. And so, we were always like, on our way to heaven and oh so glad. And when the cops beat me up, I said, I don't want to go today though. I mean, what's going on around here? I mean, can a brother live? Really? The young people told me in our Bible study, this happens to me all the time. And I was like, really? Well, why y'all never said anything? And they told me this changed my ministry whole vision. They said, we didn't think that this part of our lives was something the church would even like deal with. This is 1999. And I heard God speak to me and say, what is it about your ministry, McBride, that their parents can trust you with the salvation of their souls, but not the safety of their bodies? Wow. And it was that kind of experience that forced me to have to rethink a form of fusion ministry that intentionally kind of approached issues of justice as an outgrowth of our theological and discipleship frameworks of Christian ministry. And that's what the Black Church PAC, Black Church Action Fund, the Live Free campaign, they're all iterations of the same thing, ensuring that we as Black people who suffer from a unique set of challenges in this country, that we don't have to live our whole lives under the foot of racism and discrimination. It is our birthright to be free. For whom the Son sets free is free indeed.
Awesome.
We got some good panelists here today.
Yeah, we do.
So I want to get right into the questions. What I wanted this to be was not just a conversation when we all just kind of smile and laugh and just say, go vote. But we wanted to give out some information that people can take and be more informed during this week, because we know in Maryland and DC and many other places, early voting starts tomorrow. It starts tomorrow. We want to encourage everyone to cast their vote either this week, either by mail. Hopefully you've gotten your mail-in ballots. If you haven't, we'll talk about that as well. But definitely if you're voting in person, that you will vote before the 3rd, not just wait till the 3rd. All right. So I want to ask Pastor McBride, because I'm sure you'll be able to share this very quickly. Is there a difference between early voting and voting on election day? And if there isn't, what impact do we have if we vote early?
Yeah, no, so the great thing about a lot of the organizing that's been happening post the Voting Rights Act not being renewed. Remember, the Voting Rights Act was signed in 1968. It had a 50-year sunset. People thought they just would reauthorize it, but the Republican Congress or the Republican Senate refused to sign the Voting Rights Act in 2008. And so what that did is it unleashed state by state kinds of efforts to suppress the votes of certain communities. And so states now have like different rules pretty much in each state that certain people's rights to vote. And so our organizing, not just my organizing, but the collective movement organizing, has been trying to get early voting instituted in as many states as possible so we don't have to stand in lines as longer. So early voting is when you're able to vote before voting day. In this case, November 3rd is voting day. Some states, Maryland included, Washington, DC included, have seasons where you can vote before November 3rd. And we invite people to take advantage of that, because if you are able to vote early, it reduces the lines that other people who may not get a chance to vote early have to stand in. So in Maryland, you should definitely go vote early. And if you don't get a chance to, even if you don't, I heard you mention your absentee ballots and vote by mail, you can even show up, I know for sure, in DC and register to vote on the same day at the poll and vote. And even if you request an absentee ballot and you never receive it, you can show up to the polls as long as you haven't voted yet and ask for a provisional ballot, and they'll give one to you there. So vote early. It's one of the strategies that we've all been using across the country to make sure people do not lose the right to vote because of long lines and active voter suppression by certain folks in the political system.
Wow. So now I know we shared before we came on that we're waiting for our mail-in ballot. I know the Campbells are as well. Yeah. I know that can be a little concerning, because it's like, what happens if we don't get it in time? Campbell, have you got an answer for that?
You can still go online and look at the measures and look at the propositions in your city and find out. Yeah. So you're not just voting for the president, so you can vote up and down the ballot and find out what is happening. And then you can go. You can actually go. I mean, you'd have to get in line and all that, which I've heard a lot of people say that it's not been really challenging. It depends on the state, and it depends on just how hard they're working to suppress the vote. I know in places like Georgia and in Texas, the lines were hours long, whereas I know some people went and it was like 15 minutes. They were in and out. So no matter how long it takes, we have to do this. Yeah. We have to prepare ourselves, you know, take a lunch, take somebody with you, have a voting plan. Because we're making our plan for this week now.
Get you a brown paper bag of fried chicken.
No. or some kale, some kale chips. You can have kale chips while you're there. No, yeah. whatever you have, make sure you prepare your mind. You have to prepare your mind, literally, because if you go in there with a they bet not, they're probably going to try something. They're probably going to say something, you know. And so you need to prepare yourself, have a good dose of peace, you know.
Have the right attitude. Don't have the same attitude that I had when I voted for President Obama. I put on a suit.
You did.
And I put on a brim. Yeah. And I walked up, there was a long line of white people, and I just started yelling, "Black man voting, black man voting." And it was bad. It was bad.
He did that.
Oh God.
I'm a black man voting.
I had my lips pressed the whole time.
Don't do that this time. Don't do that.
I wish there was a video of that.
So Ted, I wanted to ask you, because Pastor Campbell just alluded to something that I think we need to at least put out there. Poll watchers, because I know that there's been some concern about discrimination at the polls and also intimidation at the polls. And I think some of that has been, you know, alluded to when it comes to poll watching. Can you explain what poll watchers are and if that should be a concern for us?
Well, there are legitimate poll watchers. However, the concern that we have right now is that the president of the United States is advocating for people who are not, you know, legitimate poll watchers to go and watch the polls, which is, you know, code for voter intimidation. And so we have to be really careful about that. And if you're going to go, there was a case in Memphis where a lady was terminated, fired, I guess, from the polls because she was turning away people who were coming to vote if they had a Black Lives Matter mask on or Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And so a few people were turned away until it was reported. And I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that, you know, because you're not supposed to wear anything that represents a candidate when you go vote. Like there's a police officer in Florida maybe who went to vote in uniform.
With a Trump mask.
With a Trump mask. You can't do that. You know, and so we have to be really careful about that when you go. I think to Erica and Warren's point, like you want to, if your ballot hasn't come, you still can go vote in person. I was literally just coming up to my coming up in the elevator, and a guy had a I just voted sticker, and he said he went. There was no wait. The first days in Georgia were really long in some counties, but now that's really kind of gone down. So most people are voting without issue or incident. But to Pastor Mike's point, if I can go back a minute to talk about this kind of strategic thing in North Carolina, I want to say it was 2016, a unanimous 3-judge panel struck down measure that the Republicans had put in place to restrict voting. And what was so interesting is that they said it was racist with surgical precision. Those are the words that they used when they wrote about it. And so we have to really be careful when we're having these conversations. We have to be mindful of how important it is. And I think that instead of people asking like, well, you know, what difference does it make if I vote and does it matter if I vote? You really should be asking yourself, why are they trying so hard to keep me from voting?
That's true.
That's the question you should be asking. Why are all these measures in place? Why are they getting rid of ballot boxes in Texas? Like, I mean, it's really in Harris County, where all these Black people in Houston, where Houston is, like, and the governor is like was trying to move them out, that the court stopped it. But you just have these people really, really trying hard because they understand the power of the poll. They understand what happens when we take that first step and vote, and they understand that they don't want to lose the political power that they have, because in my opinion, the country is moving more left and people on the right are very uncomfortable with that.
So you mentioned earlier, it was mentioned that there are several offices besides the presidential election that we need to be concerned about. And I definitely want to bring Anitra in on this conversation. Besides the presidential election, can you give us a few of the other offices that are directly important to us that are coming up in this election that we need to be informed when we go into the polls about?
Yes, absolutely. So we have to understand that there are a couple of different systems going on. We have our federal elections, and then we have our state elections, and we really also have our local elections. And so every 4 years, we have the large federal election where we get to choose our president, and there's 2 people on that ticket with the vice president. But also every 2 years, we have a rotation of those who are occupying our congressional seats. We have a legislative body that has 2 different chambers. We have the Senate, and then we also have the Congress, like the actual congressman, right? So we have to be informed about both. We have to be informed about who is going to be our representative. We have a representative democracy, meaning although we are casting individual votes, there's an electoral college that goes towards the president, but also we have a certain allotted number of people in the House chamber and then the Senate. So we each get to choose, as far as where our votes go, we are getting to choose people who are going to be in our legislative body. Those are people who create the laws. So we have a checks and balance system, or we're supposed to, where we have our executive branch, which is the president. Then we have our legislative branch. Those are the individuals actually creating the laws that the president is supposed to be executing, hence executive branch. And then we have the judicial branch, which, depending on who we put in those other 2 offices, is really going to determine how the judiciary is created. And we see that now with a Senate confirmation hearing process going on to put somebody on the Supreme Court. So everything that we do on the federal level really impacts the other 2 branches. So it's really important that we don't lose out on our opportunity to vote, because it impacts so much that goes on in our country. And then we have a similar setup, depending on the state, will determine how many chambers are in a particular state. But we do that process all over again at the state level as well. So it's really important that we're well informed on all 3 levels, federal, state, and on the local level.
So for us in Maryland, DC directly, are we having a congressional and Senate election this year? Do we look for those on the ticket, or is it just the presidential election that we need to be concerned with this year?
So I'm not voting in Maryland or DC. I'm in Virginia.
Right.
So I'm not exactly sure who's on your guys' ballot. But I've been studying in my ballot, and we have a every 2 years. So it's going to be kind of cycling in and out. So you can almost believe that you're going to have somebody that you need to be looking closely at, because it's going to come up.
And I think that's,
if I may say, JJ, we have a very unique situation in Georgia this year, because usually you don't have 2 Senate races at the same time. But Senator Isaacson retired, he retired, and so there's a special election happening for his seat. And right now, Pastor Warnock, I think you guys probably know Pastor Warnock. He's a pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church that Dr. King pastored. He's running on the Democratic ticket, and he's leading right now. And you have 2 Republicans who are running on the Republican side, Loeffler and Collins. And then we have what would be the normal Senate race for Perdue, who's running against Ossoff. So we have a very unique situation in Georgia where there are actually both Senate seats are up at the same time. So it's a very big deal in Georgia this year.
Yeah, that's very rare.
And I think that's important, because I was watching the election, the debate the other night, and Trump challenged Biden on a question, and Biden's response was, we have a Republican Congress. So as much as we think that everything happens with the presidential office, there's so much that's affected in Congress and Senate. Pastor McBride, I wanted to bring you in on that, so go ahead. You're muted.
I was watching that debate, and I was just I wanted to throw something at the TV, because I worked in the Obama administration on the Faith-Based Advisory Council, on the criminal justice reform bills. And there was bipartisan support for the Obama criminal justice reform bill because of some of the prison fellowship evangelical Republicans who were supportive of criminal justice reform, and Mitch McConnell, the Senate leader, refused to bring the bill to the floor to vote because he did not want to give Obama a victory. That's what he said. That's what he said. It was widely known. And so, you know, I was frustrated that, you know, Biden did not mention that more when they talk about, you know, Trump did the First Step Act. How come you couldn't do it in your 8 years? And he finally leaked it out on the last kind of comment he made, Republican Congress. But I felt like that needed to be explained so much more. So I appreciate it being explained here. And so to all of our listeners, it's really important for us to appreciate a president. Well, before this president, it was thought that you could not just pass laws and executive orders without the support of the Congress. This president's been doing all kind of crazy stuff, right? And he's really strained what people have thought you could do as the president. But who is in control of the Senate and the House, Republican or Democrat, it greatly determines how the president can enact their agenda. And so it's really important as we go vote to just keep that in mind, right? That if we're talking about criminal justice reform, we're talking about ending gun violence, if we're talking about addressing poverty in urban communities, if we're talking about removing the budget from wars abroad and making sure poor people have food and housing, restoring SNAP and affordable housing, that stuff has to be influenced by the House and the Senate, not just the president. So vote all the way down the ballot. And I think that'll help your elections to be beyond, do I agree with the candidate about, you know, should the moon be painted purple? Like, who cares, right? How about the Senate or how about the House? Let's talk about that as well.
Right. So but let's get back to the presidential election. So electoral college, a lot of people don't understand what that means as far as a popular vote in the electoral college. Last election, I believe Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but lost the election because of the electoral college, right? So what does that mean for those of us who live in states where it's already been declared a red state or declared a blue state? If you feel like, you know, you're in a place where your vote won't matter because it's predominantly of what party, how does that affect you? What does that mean for you, for your voting?
I think, if I may chime in, I think Anitra's point was really well made. We had to think about not just the top of the ticket. I mean, some people feel like, you know, Alabama's going to be red. That's just what it is. But there are other people who are running for office. There may be mayoral seats, there may be city council, school board, there may be initiatives on the ballot, there may be ballot initiatives, there may be, you know, you have representatives. Like, there are a lot of other things you have to think about voting for. And to the point that she made, I mean, it's a tiered kind of system. What you see at the federal level with the president and the Congress, and Senate and House of Representatives, you see on the state level, usually mirrored, and then on the city level, it's usually like the mayor and the city council. So every level matters. And I think like the local elections matter even more to your day to day, because that's really what affects you. If you have an issue in your city, or something that happens where you are, then, you know, if you have we have 2 pastors on here, or 3 pastors, sorry, Erica. We have 3 pastors on here, and then you think, oh, 4, I'm sorry, everybody's a pastor, I'm tripping. And so, I mean, all these pastors on here, think about like where you build and zoning and coding and like all these other things are things that are made through legislation. So we have to really be mindful of what's happening on the local level. The Electoral College, you know, is something, in my opinion, that should be done away with. I just don't think it's fair that you have, you know, 500,000 people in South Dakota and 30 million people in California, and they both get 2 senators. Like, that's not representative, right, in my opinion. And we have to look at this history of slavery and how that's a part of how the Electoral College was reshaped. If you think about what's happening, and here's the thing about, again, I'm not picking parties, right, but here are the facts. Like, Republicans are very concerned about the Electoral College being done away with because they understand the numbers. Look at the presidential elections. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, lost the Electoral College. There hasn't been a Republican who ran for president who won the popular vote in electoral college since George Bush's second term, not his first term. His first term, he lost the popular vote to Al Gore. Supreme Court decided that. So you got to go back to his father's second term or his first term to find that. That's in was that the 90s, early 90s or 80s? Early 90s. So they see the handwriting on the wall and they understand why that's why they're putting these judges in on these appellate judges. They're putting these judges in federal positions. They're putting judges on Supreme Court because that's their firewall. They think that's how they will be able to, protect themselves from the kind of evolution that's happening in the country by the vote. Somebody else may have more detail, but that's my take on it.
I think you got it. What I really want to address, and I'm going to come back to the Campbells. You alluded to everybody being pastors. So I want to address this from a pastoral perspective. Over the last couple of weeks, and I want to speak to a financial perspective as well. Over the last couple of weeks, we've heard a lot of conversation about religious leaders who are kind of either swaying people to vote one way or not vote at all. Then we also have leaders that are popular in our community that are financially very stable, and they are trying to sway people to vote a certain way based on the tax rates that are being proposed supposedly by Biden's plans. So I think we all need to get in this conversation because what I've noticed with this generation is we can take a tweet, we can take a one-liner on Facebook, and that becomes fact, right? And we see one picture or we see one Instagram post with 50 Cent saying, "Oh, I'm going for Trump now, 62%, no way in the world." So now all of us are thinking, okay, if Biden gets in office, then we're gonna raise our taxes 62%. So let's talk to the spiritual perspective first. We have religious leaders who are saying voting for the lesser of two evils is not biblical. Can you speak to that? Because I think that it's important that we as the church recognize that we have a responsibility to be at the polls. So can you speak to that for a second?
I think what I've heard is they're saying voting for the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil. And that couldn't be further from the truth. I take very serious offense to that. Being someone who knows our history and what it costs us to even gain the vote in this country, it's almost like committing fratricide, which is the killing of your brother. Like, when your brother is killed, you know what I'm saying? Everybody should gather around you, right? And there's a lot of blood that was spilled trying to get this vote. For me as a Christian man, I feel like it's just the equivalent of saying, God, Jesus shed his blood for us on the cross, but you don't have to live for him. In my opinion, yes, I do. There's no way, So somebody spilled their blood for me to give me the right and the privilege to vote. You know what I'm saying? That I have nothing but responsibility towards that. I have to vote, and I don't think it's not a matter of is it evil or not evil. I mean, we're talking about we serve God. Like he nobody had to vote him in. He's all powerful. We're not worried about that part of it. We're not talking about we're not trying to legislate sin and all these type of things. We're talking about political leaders.
Yeah.
I think that people are not realizing they're making it legalistic. If I do this, this is sin, right? If I do this, this is not sin. I don't want to make God mad, right? But if he came that I might have life and life more abundantly, if he wants me to prosper and be in good health, even as my soul, that means in addition to my soul, he wants me to prosper here on earth. I have to open my mouth and be a part of this process, right? We understand that a lot of this is, and y'all forgive me if this is offensive to anyone, people don't want to offend evangelicals. They don't want to offend people. Well, I might not be invited. I might not be.
Let me tell you what we can't do on here. When we say evangelicals, we're just talking about white people.
Yep.
So let's be clear.
People don't want to lose their connection.
Right.
They don't want to not be invited to certain circles, right? And so if I say something, it may be too problematic. So that's the reason a lot of churches are like, let's just walk down the middle of the line and it's safer here.
Right.
But you got to take a stand somewhere. If he came to set the captives free, you mean the captives ain't supposed to say nothing? We just supposed to wait till they set us free? No, we've got to open our mouth. Like, and I just think that people want to feel comfortable. And so they kind of stay right in the middle and they don't say anything at all. They don't speak to power. They don't post nothing. They don't say nothing. They don't do anything. How can you as a leader tell your church, your congregation, don't do nothing, don't vote? That's insane. It's sinful almost. So the stores that I go to, the police that I see, what happens in my city, I have nothing to say. I'm a slave. I'm a whole slave again. Right. I do, Lord, whatever, any way you bless me, whatever you do. It's just so poor-minded to think that you have no right to say anything, to speak up in your own life. The things that happens to our young Black boys in the criminal justice system, or when you're trying to buy a house and trying to get, all of that is stuff, that information we should have. But if we think just keep my head in the Bible, you're supposed to get that information and then go out to the world to make change. Go out to the world to make a difference, right? And if you tell me don't vote, what else are you telling me? How else are you silencing me if you're telling me don't vote? So we have a responsibility to learn. And it's not just, like you said, it's not just a Twitter or Facebook post. We've got to pick up a book. We've got to really do our research so we understand, so we equip the next generation, because what we vote for now is going to affect our children.
Right.
Yeah.
So our voices.
And I want to bring Trina in on this, because we've had some very healthy conversations around the house. My wife follows quite a few people who minister on evangelical side, and
I listen to white preachers. I do. I do. And I do, because when they're preaching the word, they're preaching the word. I'll take the word from whoever the word is coming from.
Right.
But I also, what I've noticed, and what I feel like we should probably start doing more in the African American churches, is they take a whole segment of their service to teach about this whole political arena, and how they're doing it across their pulpits and not getting in trouble. I'm not sure, but I heard someone told me that I think it is President Trump, passed some type of law that it is okay to now discuss these things over the pulpit, because that was one of his ways of getting the evangelicals to support him. But I don't think that all the African American churches are aware of what extent they can go to in talking about some of these things. But what I have noticed is that they are educating their people on not just saying go out and vote, but they're educating their people about the specifics of what they should be voting for. And yes, they do err on the side of one of the candidates. We all know that. But I think there is a healthy way and a balance that we can start putting out there so that our people are informed, because so many of our people say, well, either my vote doesn't count, or I don't know. I'm gonna be honest with you. There are times where I actually have to sit there with a dictionary just to understand what some of these terms are. But you can't not vote because of ignorance anymore. Right. Ignorance is not our excuse. Right. There's too many people dying, too many things happening to suppress us to say that we just didn't know. Yeah. So I think that the onus is on us in the African American Church to start educating and find out, what is that a law? Is that true that I can, endorse a candidate, or at least speak to some of the terminology so that people are aware of what's going on?
I think the thing that bothers me so much is when what we're saying is based in fear. If we don't do this, they're going to come in churches. They're going to take our children. They're going to eat our young. Like, I think that's so absurd and ridiculous when they have fear-based politics, which we know many of them do that. Oh, the gays are going to get us if we don't vote this way. Like, it's just
right.
Stop. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we have to make sure that we are not using those same fear tactics, but educating our people on a different level. And it's almost like I almost like y'all all falling for this, that you're only because the gay man out of your church. First of all, he's probably already there in the first place. To start there. You know what I mean? And then he's a child of God too. Right. So to talk about that he's you know what I mean? God is, there's not some separate places he's going to send them all. Like,
Right.
so I just, it's
And
just
that's the
so
important
absurd.
part. I absolutely agree with Pastor Erica, because Jesus would call out the religious hypocrite. And another word for hypocrite is actor. And what he was doing was accusing them of preaching but not doing. There's
Yeah.
an emptiness there. And what I found is that and I used to struggle with this as a Christian going to vote. How do I reconcile these candidates and their policies with my faith? And the problem becomes when we try to make America into a Christian nation. The solution should be, we should be trying to make America a discipled nation. Now, the first option put being a Christian on everybody else. Now I have to vote my belief system on you and impose it on you. But to be a discipled nation puts the responsibility on me as a believer to now take my faith along with the action, make sure I have a clear political pathway to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and set captives free as he showed us. Discipleship is being elbow to elbow with the people who need you. But if you really think about it, we've been trying to vote for people to stay far away from us.
I think that's so good. And one of the things that I've often said when it comes to that particular conversation is that I've been to, people think, America's a Christian nation. No, it's a nation where the majority of people identify as Christian. I've been to a Muslim nation where I was asleep, and at like 5 a.m. I heard this noise, and I woke up like, what is that? And it was a call to prayer from the mosque that was across the street, right? You can't file a noise complaint. You can't say I want to, that's disturbing me. Like, that's just what it is. When you went to all the restaurants and in the mall and any place that you would go, no place served alcohol. Not that I would know, but no place served alcohol, right? Unless you had to get it from like a hotel or very specific places, and they're very specific about what you can and cannot do because Islam informs the laws of the country. Here, that's not what we want. That's not what this is supposed to be. To Anitra's point, it is about being able to protect my right to pray if I want to, but not imposing that on you if you don't want to, right? By the same token, if I want to pray in my place or my church, or my car or whatever, then there should be no law prohibiting me from doing that, from carrying out my faith. But I shouldn't penalize other people or try to impose it on other people. So to the conversation, Anitra and I are the only people not pastors. I'm not speaking for her, just for me. Like the whole white evangelical thing is a very interesting conversation. Y'all listen to them. I'm only concerned about listening to people who I feel like care about me and my people. If you don't care about Black folks, if you don't care about marginalized people, I don't want to hear anything you have to say. I just don't. Because I can just listen to Warryn, I can listen to JJ, I can listen to Pastor Mike, I can pull up a G.E. Patterson video. I'm good. It's not like I'm not going to get the word, right? If I don't listen to those people. And I'm not saying that's all of them, because that's not true either. There are people in that particular faith system who do speak out, who are, doing these things that we need them to do. But here's the challenge for me. We don't just need people to not be racist.
Yeah.
We need you to be anti-racist.
Yeah.
You have to actively and actually do something, say something, stand for something that causes the system of racism to be disrupted in an effort to dismantle it. And that's the challenge that we are having in these particular conversations and spaces that we're having, not just because you're silent and you can smile and then people don't want to have those conversations, because when you have a conversation, then you have to take a stand. And that's what we're seeing in this moment, in the uprising. People are like, Timothy Wright said, whose side are you on? Like, stand up, get up. Like, whose side are you on? We need to know where you stand, because these are real life things that we are experiencing, with my brother, Pastor Mike, being, pulled over, beaten by the cops. Like, then what happens? When that happens, is there any accountability? Is there any recourse? Are there any consequences when we are mishandled and when we are killed and when we are maligned? And that's why it's so important for people to stand up and be very clear about the fact that you are concerned about every marginalized group in this country, specifically Black folks.
Here's part of the problem. You kind of have a hard time undoing how people have been thinking. about what we are historically. So you can tell them to stand up, but if for their whole life they've thought if a Black man looks a certain way, he is a threat, he is a problem. If a Hispanic man or Hispanic woman comes, they only are here to do ... You have now just put them in a box, and that's the hard thing that you're trying to get them to understand. So if we did come to the table with some of our evangelical, they would passionately tell you, well, what did they do wrong? Why would the police beat them if they weren't doing anything wrong?
Right.
Like, and mean it from the bottom of their heart. They watched George Floyd and said, well, what did he do? Why didn't he just comply? Why didn't you just say, yes, sir? No, sir. Well, we can look at videos of people of other cultures run around, jump in the car, tase them back, knock them down, shooting at them, and they go home.
Right.
But our children,
I can't drop my wallet because in front of the police.
So even in these circles where we're trying to have this conversation, we're trying to undo that.
Yeah.
The fact that they think Black women are stronger, so we, we don't have to give you guys that because you're so strong. You made it through slavery. You're so strong.
This is what's so deep to me about all this stuff. Like a few white evangelicals still invite me to come speak at their conferences, and I gladly come. I start off by telling they full of the devil, but they can't be saved. They gotta be because if you're full of the devil, you can be emptied of the devil. So it's not a permanent condition. In my Pentecostal theology, that's how I was raised. Praise God. Come on out. I think you say that. Come on out. Come on out there, devil.
Come on out. Loose here.
But I told him. I said, what's so fascinating about white Christians in particular? Y'all are so good at being experts about everything, except for how to understand how to stop being racist to Black people. Mm-hmm. Like you can be an expert in finance, politics, business, architecture, flying a plane, going to the moon. But when we start talking about how to get the police to stop killing my son, your brain just can't seem to comprehend the 300 years worth of evidence that this is a real problem. And so I believe they are willfully obtuse. And that is why I think Black people have to, as Brother Ted said, make a decision to get these folks out your head. Like, with all due respect to Brother Price and to the Evans family, who I love their ministry, but they are having a conversation with people in their head.
Yeah.
They are arguing against themselves. They're not talking to us because we know Jesus not on the ballot. I think Jesus not on the ballot. They're trying to figure out. They're trying to figure out how to appease people who they want to stay in proximity to. And that's fine. God bless you. We all got our allegiances and our relationships. But I do think at some point we have to have the ability to trust that the God of all creation wants us to be free. And there are many ways to be free. Voting is not the only way, but it is one. Other ways, we talk about it all the time. Have a financial plan. Practice some ethical principles in your relationships. Pray and fast and eat a healthy diet, exercise. All of those things contribute to our freedom. Voting does as well. And we should not shrink that because we're trying to appease some folk who are willfully obtuse. They understand what's happening. They just don't want to change.
They don't want to lose their power and their privilege. That's what
Listen, there are a lot of people who are they don't agree with either side. There are a lot of people like that. I don't agree with him and I don't agree with him. And I think that's where a lot of people are like, just gonna sit this one out.
But here's the thing, at this point, it ain't about, I don't like Trump, I like Biden or whatever it is. Clearly, I know I'm not supposed to say this on here, but for me, in my house, it's about get that guy out of here.
Yeah.
We can't, because the thing, what it has incited, listen, we're 2 nanoseconds from civil war.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, and then we'll deal with what happens after that. This next guy's put to the fire, but this person is not right for our country. That's all I'm concerned with.
But there are a lot of people who only hear, he said Jesus at a conference. And then, Biden said what he's like. There are some believers who are literally on the line. Pastor Mike, and I'm not running the interview. I'm sorry, y'all.
No, that's fine.
Mike, what would you say? Not just get Trump out, but why is Biden the guy?
Yeah, I would say two things, right? It's ironic that Biden is a practicing Catholic Christian, and Trump don't even know God. Like he wouldn't know Jesus if Jesus came to his Trump hotel and told him this idea and said, "I want to check into your hotel." He wouldn't even know who Jesus was.
Yeah.
But 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians.
Gotta hear none of that here. Gotta hear none of that here.
I think this is really an issue, and I talk about this a lot. This is what my research is around, American civil religion. And what we don't really understand and grasp is that really we're not talking about Republicans being of a certain religion, and that is Christianity, right? What we're really talking about in the whole grand scheme of things is actually a completely separate religion that both sides have been engaged in. And it's in the civil religion. And if you really look closely at the symbols, minus the whole randomly mentioning Jesus thing, you can look through the gambit of our politicians and realize that they typically talk about symbols that are more associated with the Old Testament. There's usually like this God who's really authorized us to go and conquer lands and manifest destiny. And really it's a more palatable version of religion that borrows from Christianity enough to make most Christians feel like we're engaged and we're in a place that really corresponds with our personal faith, but really it's a separate and completely different religion that's been studied for quite a while. Another way to refer to it is the American way of life. And when you start to realize that people are really more practicing the American way of life, that's how you can understand how you can check the check box of being an evangelical or what have you. Even on the other side, you can do all of that and still feel like you're moving forward in your personal faith, but really you're buying into this idea that there are certain privileges, advantages, powers that go to you by virtue of your Americanhood. This is why there's an obsession with Israel, because really what you're doing is you're saying that Israel got this privileged position with God and they are allowed to conquer lands. Well, we are the new Israel, although there is nothing in scriptures that said there was going to be an Israel 2.0, also called America. No, we have got to start dispelling what's really going on, which is this is a demonic attack. It is veiling people's eyes. And Jesus spoke out about this more than abortion and sexual sins. He was into people trying to pass off their different religion, their different beliefs as something that was supposed to be his kingdom. That's what he was calling out. That's hypocritical. That is not going to get you into the kingdom of God. And we, as actual kingdom citizens, have keys. Thank you, Lord. That's going to unlock the knowledge and the power that's going to set people free. And when we look that up in the Greek, that word to set free, it really means that psychological bondage. That's really what we're coming for. We have to.
I like you, Anitra.
Yeah. I like you too, Erica Campbell.
We gotta ask one last question. I don't want to hold on to you all the time. Pastor Mike, I want to ask you something because I know you can probably speak to this and give us some information that we didn't have. In the DC and Maryland area, we have a very large community of affluent African Americans. PG County, Prince George's County, is the richest African American county in the country. All right. So 50 Cent was on Instagram and Twitter the other day and said there's no way he's voting for President Biden because of a supposed tax hike that's coming that'll send our taxes to 62%. That was for, I think, LA and New York. Then there are other regions where their taxes will go up as well. Can you give us some information about that so everyone's not thinking that, you know, if Biden gets off, and not that I'm supporting either candidate, but just so we can say if Biden gets in office, that means all of us are going to be going down to 38% of our income. Can you speak to that for a second, please?
Yeah, I mean, this is the reality around the whole tax plans. I think it's just important again to look at facts borne out by history and not propaganda repeated by he ain't the father of all lies, because that belonged to Satan, but he got to be related to that joker. Like, he may be like a distant cousin or uncle, because every time he speak, he don't speak no truth come out of his mouth. I believe Biden's plan, and I'm not an expert on tax law, but I believe Biden's plan really targets people who make more than $400,000 a year, right? And so PG County is indeed the wealthiest county. There's a great book that you should read called Disintegration by Eugene Robinson. He has a whole chapter on PG County, which is how I heard about PG County being such a wealthy place for Black folks to live. But I think it's important to appreciate that, $400,000 a year is quite a bit of money. And I would argue that even those living in PG County, the percentage of those who are actually making that amount, may not be as high as you think. And so we can't make our tax policy decisions based off of an aspirational, I will make it one day, and so I'm gonna vote now for a tax plan, because when I make it, Negro, you ain't making that. They have built the system to keep you from making that. You understand? Right. What you should be asking yourself is, how does the wealth of the wicked, the greedy, the exploiters of labor, the stealers of land, those who cheat to put their money in other parts of the world so they don't have to fund public schools that your kids go to, don't have to fund parks where your kids can play, don't have to fund colleges where your children can go to for free. How do we recoup the tax base of our citizenry across the country and put it into those things that actually improve the quality of life for our folks? And so I would say, again, don't fight the battles and the conversations that other people are having. Don't put that in your head and you start arguing against yourself, so you can be proximate to people who do not love you. And listen, 50, God bless 50. But I felt like 50's statement was a pretty good public expression of selfishness related to the reality of people who support his music and his career. Because the truth is, we as Black people, not because of our lack of work ethic, not because of our ingenuity and brilliance, our economic status in this country is because of 300 years of forced, free, and unpaid or underpaid labor, and the systematic policy of banks, housing, and other markets to keep us from building the wealth that our white counterparts were able to build, particularly when they came home from the Second World War and got the GI Bill, and their wealth boomed. And so we have to be, as Black people, not internalize these kinds of pathological descriptions of why we don't have wealth, even in PG County. I would say, don't be like W.E.B. Du Bois said. He regretted the talented 10th idea later in life, because he said, I didn't think the talented 10th would be just as selfish as everybody, their white counterparts, right? Wow. Like, we got to make sure that we are giving back, and that's what taxes do. They help to make sure that we level the playing field and at least have a safety net to catch every human being who needs it.
Can I add to that too? Yes. If you are making $400,000 or more, most people who are making that money, we have, tax planners and accountants and business managers. If we are getting taxed 62%, there's so many ways that get around that, and deductions that we take, and we don't, what I'm saying? So I mean, just as somebody who's been in that bracket for forever, I'm just saying, that it's not that big an issue to a person making that money. So right. don't nobody get scared about that and say, I don't want to vote for Biden because of that.
Right. I agree.
And I say this is where I think we shine the spotlight. 50s, whatever. It's not even merit of response to me. But I was reading this piece. It said the using data from the Federal Reserve of Boston, this only give context is what Pastor Mike is saying and underscore what Warryn was saying. African Americans in Boston, the Boston area, have a median net worth of $8.
Wow.
8. White households in Boston, on the other hand, average a net worth of $247,500. So Fitz can miss me and most Black folks with that craziness he's talking. And he did this at like these exorbitantly high rates, which, I mean, I'm sure he's wealthy, but I mean, that kind of rate is like people who make a whole lot of money, like Jeff Bezos, like Warren Buffett, that kind of money. But that just underscores to me where we really are. And again, the kind of real life issues that people are talking about. And he's complaining about paying taxes on his wealth when people are trying to figure out what they're going to eat. When people are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent. When 1 in 6 businesses is closed. When people don't know how they're going to put their children through school. When people don't know how they're going to pay insurance. When people don't know how they're going to pay their medical bill. People have real challenges. And the majority of Black folks in this country are not living, are either poor or right above the poverty line. They're not doing super well, right? So I think that just kind of hopefully underscores why we should be engaged, why we need to be a part of this political process, and understand that voting is not the end of it, it's the beginning, it's the doorway. And you have to engage politicians, you have to run for office, you have to hold people accountable, you have to show up to cities, the council meetings and school board meetings, and you got to really be engaged in this thing. You got to be committed to it.
What you should also know too, just in hip hop culture, a guy like 50, if you follow him or you follow hip hop, it's all about gaining attention. Everything if you follow him, you look at the beefs that he engages and stuff, like the silly stuff. What he's doing is really just, he must have an album coming or something dropping, and they do things like that to make controversial statements, to put a big spotlight on them, things that they may not. He may go in that ballot box and actually vote for Biden. We don't know. But my thing is, don't pay attention to that. He's just trying to get attention on himself. No more than somebody who bought a billboard.
You think that does real harm, or is it just? I mean, I get what you're saying it's gimmicky and some people do it, but
it does extreme harm.
Yeah, because some people just need a reason.
Yeah, it does
a lot of harm. If they're already confused, somebody that they kind of feel comfortable with, they're going to listen to what you say. It's the reason why we need to have our mouths open. It's the reason why I wanted the gospel artists to start talking in the first place, because somebody that's on the fence, if they believe in you, if they've been following, especially with social media, you're posting your kids and your family and what you think and what you believe in, what you feel, and you say something of value that resonates with them, they're going to go, I'm going to lean in that direction. That's a lot of power to have, but if you're responsible with it, we can help people make better decisions. And there are a lot of people who are making selfish statements just about them, and they're not thinking about how it's going to affect people who are not in their tax bracket, who don't have what they have, who are struggling just to pay insurance and a car note,
Yeah.
And that's so important. Like, we need leadership. They need to be discipled. Nations need to be discipled. And I work with church leaders who don't know how to have these conversations with their congregations, or with church leaders who say, we're losing on the millennials, like the young people are not coming. That's because we're not seeing actual results. We're not seeing the impact. We're not seeing the benefit of even being associated with a particular religion. So, I mean, at this point, I just echo what everybody else says. We need the right leadership, and we need to be able to get to these issues and face them head on with wisdom.
And I just want to offer one thing to the congregation members that are listening. I remember when I first started doing justice ministry a little bit more edgy than I did previously. And some people left my church because they didn't like it. More people joined than left. But, my heart as a pastor, like, oh, man, that's tough. Yeah. Support y'all's pastors, man. Support Pastor Trina, support JJ, support Pastor Warryn and Pastor Erica. Soon to be Senator Ted Winn. I see that in your future, dear brother, because you got something, Doc. And maybe future Senator, I don't know, Dr. Brown, you may be a preacher, politician, I don't know. I'm just prophesying. But I want to just celebrate all of you all for using your platform in this way, because I know it does come with some tension or risk, and it does cost you something. But I believe there is no amount of money that is worth the liberation of our people. And so we ought to be able to speak out. And so I salute you, Brother JJ and Pastor Trina. JJ was one of our first, and Pastor Trina, they were one of our first folks who did a PSA for us in 2017.
Yeah.
Before we even took it on vote and getting out the vote, and Warryn Erica been with us for quite some time. And so I just want to tell everyone who's watching, support the artists, support your pastors when they step out there. They won't always get it all right, but that's fine. Encourage them, because you don't got it all right, and they be encouraging you until you get it together. And someone who does this a lot more full time, I just want to celebrate y'all and thank y'all. This is so encouraging to hear this conversation at this depth. It's a real blessing, and it's what is needed in this perilous time.
Well, we want to thank all of you for joining us for this conversation today. It was so enlightening, so powerful, just to hear different perspectives of why this election is so important. Believe it or not, these are conversations that Pastor and I have around the house. Sometimes they get passionate. Then we got to hug afterwards, because because they say how can two walk together unless they agree? Well, sometimes we don't always agree. We got to walk together anyhow. But one thing we do agree upon is that we will be voting this year, and we want you all to do the same, which is why we had this conversation tonight. Thank all of you for your perspective and for your conversation and for your your truth, just speaking your truth. And in spite of, like Pastor Mike said, whatever tension could potentially come, because anytime you speak, there's going to be an opinion. Right. But we have to forget the opinions and still speak to what we know is important to say.
Right. And I think it's also important that we not be intimidated by the lingo. Like, even for the average person, sitting and listening to a conversation like this can be intimidating, because we have not been very good in the past of educating ourselves on these things. We just go by what our mama told us or what our grandmama told us and the little limited knowledge that they might have had. But we cannot let that stop us in 2020 and on. We cannot let that stop us from making these important decisions about voting. And if you are one of those undecided people and you just don't know which side to go on, and the lingo seems to intimidate you, think about the future of your friends, your family, your loved ones. Think about what the candidates are saying and what they're proposing, and how they're responding to these very urgent matters that have been happening in our nation today. That says a lot. It says a lot about the character of a person on how they respond, if they respond, and when they respond. So as you go to the polls, just think about that. Think about your future, your family's future, your loved one's future, and that alone should sway your vote.
And for this year, we know, like we said, tomorrow starts early voting for Maryland and DC, and wherever you are. If you can vote early, vote early. If not, make sure you go to the polls on November 3rd. It is our duty, it is our right, and it's our responsibility to be at the polls and make sure our voices are heard. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation tonight, and we're praying God's blessings over you. And we believe that because of what you poured in tonight, you're going to reap. So thank you so much again. We love y'all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank y'all for having us.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Love you all tonight. So much.
Bye.
Hey!
Really?
Wait. Before we go, Pastor Mike, I wanted to connect you and Ted, because he really wants to be involved in any way possible with Black Church PAC.
Man, look, we gonna be in Atlanta tomorrow. We starting a bus tour. The bus is actually pulling up right now, and I love to have you come and we do a little interview on the bus tour with you tomorrow. Are you around tomorrow in Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm not traveling. I'm not traveling. It's a pandemic.
Cool. What's your number? I'll text you.
Who wants your number, Ted? What's your number?
202 904 5313.
You still got a DC number.
5313. That's the only number I ever had my whole life.
And Anitra, I would like you on my radio show. Just the way you speak, I think, could really educate a lot of the listeners and stuff like that. So if y'all can pass her number or pass my number to her, I'd love to talk to you about coming on the show. I have Pastor Mike on, and I've had Ted on as well. Yeah. Everybody. So I would like you.
I like your information too, Anitra. I don't know if you want to give it out to me or something, but I think you the bomb, girl. You
I need you on this team.
Thank
We need it
you.
on the team, Mike.
Yeah,
Let's
Pastor,
do it.
Pastor Mike, I'll get Anitra's number to you, and Erica, I'll make sure I get it to you as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Pastor. Love you guys.